Shalom, and welcome to Inside Israel News. I'm your host, Mensch-Kight. In this podcast, you'll hear detailed and relatively unbiased information about Israeli politics and current events. Welcome to episode 6. Today we'll be talking a little bit about the U.S.-Israeli relationship, some recent headlines related to that, and we'll be sharing with you some of the scuttlebutt that's going about the Israeli street, if you will, some of the rumors and ideas that are going about there. And I'll be discussing two political parties. We'll be talking about parties that are formed by former chiefs of staff to Bibi Netanyahu, interestingly enough. So, welcome to episode 6. Buckle up, and here we go. So first things first, it looks like Israel is going to be receiving a new ambassador with the new administration. Nothing unusual about that. Talk around town is that ambassador is going to be Dennis Ross. Now, Dennis Ross was part of the peace negotiations between the Clinton administration and Yasser Arafat 20 years ago, and he wrote an excellent book called The Missing Piece, Peace, the Missing Piece. Anyway, a funny title, but where he details in, just absolutely thorough detail how those negotiations went and how Arafat sabotaged them and misrepresented and mischaracterized those negotiations so as to benefit his side. And, of course, he launched the Second Intifada, which his widow recently was in the news saying was the biggest mistake of his life. Maybe he should have taken the peace deal. We'll never know because that's not what happened. And of course, that violence brought down Ehud Barak's government, and since then, Israel just has not had the same patience for peace negotiations because they got to the final stages there in 2000 and watched it all crumble. So, if you're curious about that may be one reason. But Dennis Ross will be a competent and decent ambassador to Israel, and people on the right are not too keen about it because it signals perhaps a renewal of the sort of Clinton-esque approach to attempting to create peace talks or foster peace talks. But who knows? There are a lot of open questions. Again, everyone expects Joe Biden to abandon the Trump plan, but what will be his plan? And what will be the role of Arab governments now pressuring the Palestinians to reach a settlement as they're making peace with Israel? What will be the role of Iran, which obviously does not want peace between Israel and the Palestinians? They want ongoing conflict. Well, that's our next topic, Iran. There are a number of people in the Biden administration now who are pouring a little cold water on the return to the Iran deal. There's some statements that suggest that while they would like to return to the Iran deal, maybe people should be patient and careful about that. So it's entirely possible that they may be walking back their enthusiasm for the Obama-era Iran deal and maybe looking to take a tougher line. This will probably not be the Trump tougher line, of course, and who knows how the Iranians will respond, but obviously any effort to prevent Iran from developing nuclear weapons would be positive. That said, if the U.S. goes weak and gets weak-kneed about the situation with Iran, that will lead the Middle East closer to war, and we may see a moment where Israel and their newfound Arab allies may have to strike first for fear that Iran might become a member of the nuclear club, so to speak. Israel is also engaged in some negotiations among different parties in the government about the question of the natural gas deposits that Israel has. A number of years ago, Israel discovered that under the Mediterranean Sea, in regions controlled by Israel, there are a number of gas deposits worth billions of dollars, and Israel has been receiving gas through a pipeline via Egypt. But Israel now has its own unique energy source. They're an energy producer and an energy exporter. Liquefied natural gas may allow Israel in the future to become a major exporter. Israel doesn't have a direct pipeline to Europe, but they could. in the future. Europe is the nearest major consumer. But with trade agreements opening up with different Arab countries, who knows? Israel might be selling natural gas to Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and other countries as well, possibly by direct pipeline in the future. The pipeline from Egypt has been troublesome because there have been a number of terrorist attacks on it in recent years that have shut it down. So that is an unreliable source of energy now. But Israel has its own natural gas, and there are questions that have been raised about how much gas they should be pumping out. And of course, Israel is a member of the Paris Climate Accord, so they are trying to reach 30% quote-unquote renewable energy production by 2030, and they want to set higher targets for 2050. And that for the most part, renewable energy in Israel has been by means of solar. Israel does have some nuclear power available, but natural gas is really the best way for Israel to go because they have their own and they can produce a lot of electricity. There is also an effort afoot to switch all of Israeli appliances over to electrical rather than gas, because that way, with lower gas consumption in the home directly, then it's just a question of how they generate electricity. So those are some of the things that are being debated there. We're kind of having similar debates over here in the U.S. Important to note that the Israeli right is not as opposed to talk of climate change action and that kind of thing as we are familiar with here in the U.S. Climate change obviously is not a huge priority here in the U.S. It's a little bit higher priority in Israel, even for parties on the right. Not a major one, but a higher one. And obviously for more left-leaning Israeli parties, then it's much higher priority for them. Another bit of election news, we have the Labour Party. I mentioned the zombie Labour Party run by Ran Huldai, the Yisraelim, or Israelis party. That's the new party on the left. And I mentioned that Amir Peretz may be joining that party. Amir Peretz has been the leader of Labour for some time. Well, he's not anymore. And Labour has... his leaving the Labour Party leadership. Labour is holding primaries to determine who is going to be the leader of the party, and they are polling well below the threshold. So this is the historical, traditional center-left party in Israel that governed the country from its founding almost without pause until 1977, and has served in government many times since then, and led several governments since then. Well, this party is essentially gone, and they're choosing from 7 candidates who is going to be the new party leader. One of the more promising candidates is Merav Michaeli, who is a former journalist and news anchor. She's pretty well known in Israel, so that would bring a good name to Labor. And she has not ruled out the possibility that this Labour Party might join a party list, a shared list with another party to increase the likelihood of clearing the threshold. So the ideological allies that she might seek out for that in order to win seats are obviously limited. And the best choices for her would probably be Yisraelim, Huldai's party, but also she could look at Meretz, which is the party to the left of Huldai and to the left of Labour. Meretz and Labour have run together in the past, but it's not clear if they'd be willing to run together again. And right now, Meretz is polling pretty well above the threshold themselves, so not sure they'd want to jeopardize that by joining with another political party when they don't have to. So we will see how that turns out. I'll be talking about Labour in a future episode when I talk about the Israeli left, because while Labour is not clearing the threshold right now, it's important to understand Labour's history and its role in Israeli politics, somewhat like Likud. I described thoroughly last time, a little too thoroughly, some of the feedback I got, but I tried to stay on point. I really did. And anyway, so we'll discuss Labour a little bit more concisely and a little bit more on point in a future episode, so that we can go over that, and then you'll have some insight on the Israeli left. But Merav Michaeli is the front runner or expected winner of the Labour primary, and we'll see what's going to happen with labor, whether they're going to disappear from Israeli politics or find a way to become relevant once again. All right, on to virus measures. The Israeli government is debating a further travel ban to prevent new strains of the virus from coming to Israel and becoming an issue there. There have been rumors and talk of all kinds of new, more contagious strains or what have you going around. So far, no major effect on the death toll or death rate or what have you, or let's just say how deadly or dangerous the virus is, but potentially more contagious in any case. So Israeli officials are naturally a little bit cautious about those, so they don't want to have these new strains come. That said, Israel has done a magnificent job of vaccinating a large portion of the population, starting with healthcare workers and working their way down from the most vulnerable. Almost everyone in Israel who wants a vaccine has had one, and the second round of vaccines the second shot of each vaccine will be going out soon. This has been a magnificent result. Israelis are very excited about it, and that has allowed, as I was talking about in the last episode, talk of ending the virus crisis, lockdowns, and all that kind of thing for Israelis, and slowly returning to normalcy. Now, to the scuttlebutt or the rumors or the feeling on the street, talking to a number of Israelis, those who love and those who hate Bibi. There are not a lot of people in between these days. People are either very enthusiastic that he's the greatest prime minister Israel's ever had and he needs more time to govern the country, or he's the worst thing that's ever happened to the world and what have you. But there is a growing sense or consensus among people that because of the way Bibi has handled the virus crisis, especially the vaccinations, and now that the lockdowns and all of that are coming to an end, there's a greater consensus that Bibi is probably going to win this election. That those parties that are refusing to work with him may find themselves pressured to join a government with him, especially those on the right, including the two we'll be talking about here in a little bit. And that could change the political outlook. Before this particular development, the feeling was that there will probably be a hung parliament, that they'll be going back to elections this summer sometime. But now with this, it's entirely possible. Let's just say people are feeling that Bibi is going to win and perhaps go another full term as prime minister, or certainly if he sets up a rotation with someone, he may do 2 more years and then step down. But growing sense that Bibi is likely to win the coming election. So watch out. That may be the news we go forward with. Obviously, for the election, what we'll be doing is I'll be covering the parties here over the next few episodes, in addition to the news that's going on. And then as we get closer, I'm going to look at polls again. Right now, polls haven't shifted that much on a lot of these things, but let's give it another week or so and see how things shake out in terms of the polls. And especially as, with the virus response and the vaccines and all of that, how is that going to impact Likud's numbers in particular? If Likud sees a significant bump, that could definitely change the outlook for the election. So we'll see. But I'll be going over all of that. And then, as we get close to the election, I'll analyze kind of what results we're likely to see. And then, of course, we'll have results of the election, and I'll talk about that and the likely coalitions that might form, and we'll go through the coalition building process, which can be a drawn-out, lengthy, complicated thing in and of itself. So there'll be lots of fun for the next 4 or 5 months in this process at least. And if we're going to new elections, then there'll be even more fun after that. So we will see. All right, now it's time to move on to political parties. The party I'm going to talk about next is a center-right party that is a member of the right bloc, and this is a party that's been around for a little while, called Yisrael Beteinu. Yisrael Beteinu in Hebrew means Israel is our home, somewhat defines the party's history. As we know, after the Cold War, there was a large influx of Russian Jews. Over 1 million moved to Israel over the course of the decade. And those Russian Jews have struggled to integrate into Israel. And there's a number of cultural factors for that and a number of related issues. So let's go into that real quick, and that will help us understand that party and that demographic in Israel. So Russian Jews, of course, lived in the Soviet Union. And in the Soviet Union, Judaism, like all religions, was banned. So there were a number of Jews persecuted by Stalin, Jewish doctors and intellectuals especially. This was his favorite pastime after the Second World War, was making sure that Jews and other ethnic groups knew to mind their P's and Q's in his totalitarian system. And this led to a number of problems for Jews in Russia and the Eastern Bloc, prohibited from practicing their religion. A number of Jews, of course, refused. So you have a group of Jews that were called the refuseniks. Natan Sharansky and several others were jailed, many of them, for practicing Judaism, trying to teach Judaism, and they felt that at least some religious tradition was valuable. But the greater part of Russian Jews, like people living in the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc, were basically secularized. And so these are largely pork-eating, shellfish-eating people who are considered Jewish by the Russians and will never be accepted by Russians or other Eastern Bloc countries, Poles and Romanians, as Poles, Romanians, or Russians. They will always be Jews to them, whether they, regardless of the language they speak, regardless of their level of practice in Judaism, they're always going to be Jews from an ethnic point of view. So these people faced broad persecution. When the Iron Curtain fell and the Berlin Wall came down, obviously, for those for whom it was most important to be Jewish, they left right away. And over the years, large numbers of Jews left and moved to Israel, where they faced a number of problems. So education was a fairly common thing in these Eastern Bloc countries. You had a lot of people who were dentists, doctors, and who had various professions that they had worked at. But none of those universities and none of those technical schools and a considerable amount of that experience didn't count in Israel. So you have people who might be a veterinarian in Ukraine now suddenly moves to Israel and is a janitor because their degree and their certifications and what have you are not good in Israel. So there was those who went back to school and tried to start over again, but a lot of people felt that they were forced to take a step down. Also, obviously, moving to Israel, they had to start learning Hebrew and integrating into Jewish culture. There's also the religious issue. We'll talk about the Haredi a little later on, but in Russia, you are counted as a Jew or by any ethnicity based on your father, right? So if you are Dagestani and your mother is Russian, you are a Dagestani. Right. If you are, if your father was Jewish, you're a Jew, even if your mother wasn't. According to rabbinical law, their practice is to count who is Jewish according to the mother. So this is a challenge. A lot of people wonder about this because if you actually read the Torah, everywhere it's patriarchal entirely. It's the father who determines who is a Jew. But the rabbinical commentaries on the Torah were written during the Roman era, and the Romans went by the mother. So a lot of Roman laws ended up in Jewish practice. Well, this becomes a big problem for Russian Jews because in Russia, you're a Jew if your father was a Jew, and according to religious Orthodox Haredim in Israel, you are a Jew if your mother was a Jew. So a lot of these Russians moved to Israel. They've been persecuted as Jews. They've been mistreated. They're like, finally I'm in a Jewish country and I'm free. And then they find out, well, you can't be buried in a Jewish cemetery and you may have trouble marrying someone unless you undergo conversion because guess what? You're not Jewish enough for us. So these people have had a lot of issues, especially with the rabbinical authorities and the rabbinate in Israel, and they have been frustrated by that. They've been frustrated by their economic outlook and having to take that step down, moving from wherever they were to Israel. And there have been all the usual problems that accompany integration, much as Israel dealt with its Mizrahi population back when Israel integrated 800,000 Jews from Arab countries, who were people who spoke Arabic and lived according to Arabic culture and Arabic norms, and now had to move into what was now essentially a European country and live according to Ashkenazic ideas and live with them. So this has been the struggle for Russian Jews. Well, a couple of political parties formed to address Russian Jews in Israel in particular. One of them was Yisrael Beteinu, which means basically those who immigrated to Israel. And this was sort of a center-left party. Ended up going into one of the larger left-wing parties, Labor. And Yisrael Beteinu. Yisrael Beteinu, Israel is our home, was the right-wing Russian political party, and Yisrael Beteinu survived. Now, ultimately, Yisrael Beteinu came into the existence with the leadership of Avigdor Lieberman. And Avigdor Lieberman had served as the head of the Prime Minister's office under Bibi Netanyahu during his first tenure from 1996 to 1999. This is kind of this funny trend in Israeli politics, that there are so many people on the right who are former co-workers of Netanyahu, former associates, people who work closely with him. So Lieberman went with Yisrael Beteinu, and that party is very nationalist, very supportive of a strong Jewish state of Israel. They want a strong military and a strong defense position. They are suspicious of the peace process, but the party does currently support the two-state solution. I would say that while they are right-leaning, Lieberman has had an open mind in areas that have been really interesting. For example, he's pushed that Israel should consider joining NATO or the European Union. The idea that Israel should not necessarily regard itself as a Middle Eastern country, that if Arab countries won't accept Israel as a Middle Eastern country, perhaps Israel should be a European country, right, and look to doing more trade with Europe. And that's had some pros and cons in that particular vein, but it is interesting to see a major Israeli political figure advocating that. This is the party Yisrael Beteinu started as. They are also very secularist. They oppose the religious laws and the power of the Haredim that I'll talk about in another episode when I discuss the ultra-religious parties. And they are, again, they have in the past been largely focused on the issues pertinent to Russian Jews who have moved to Israel. Now, since then, their party has broadened quite a bit into normal center-right Israeli politics, center-right secularists who are at different times to the right of Likud will find a home with Yisrael Beteinu, and that's been often the case. The two parties ran together in 2013, and they decided to separate after that because they won fewer seats together than they did apart. And so Lieberman learned his lesson, so he keeps separate. Avigdor Lieberman has served as defense minister. He's served in a number of cabinet posts during his time in the Knesset. He has been serving in government in one form or another pretty consistently since 2009 as an ally of Bibi's. But in recent years, he's been an opponent of Netanyahu as prime minister, and he's been pushing that Bibi should go and someone new should take over, which is interesting since he's been involved in Israeli politics for, a quarter of a century, and he has, shown no interest in retiring or leaving himself. So interesting that. But nevertheless, Yisrael Beteinu is a secular, nationalist, right-wing party originally built out of Israel's Russian immigrant population, but now serving as sort of a, if you're more secular nationalist than Likud and you're upset with Bibi for some reason, Yisrael Beteinu may be your home. All right, the next party on the center right that we are going to talk about is Yamina. Yamina in Hebrew means the right, and this is the party that used to be New Right not that long ago, but he's shortened it just to Right, Yamina. This is led by Naftali Bennett. Naftali Bennett is another former chief of staff, former associate of Bibi Netanyahu in earlier years, who has gone out of Likud and away from the prime minister to lead his own political movement. Naftali Bennett left Likud to join the National Religious Party. The National Religious Parties existed for some time. It was Israel's main religious party. They are built on the National Religious Movement. If you go to Israel, you'll see national religious people. They have usually knit kippot, and the women will wear like a scarf covering over their hair, but not the same coverings that you'll see on the Haredi women. They also tend to have more knee-high skirts rather than the ankle-length skirts that you'll see on the ultra-Orthodox. This is a semi-secular, but also very semi-religious movement. So they're kind of in between, let's say, secular Israelis and the ultra-Orthodox. And they are dedicated to being religious. They're just not as religious, I guess you could say, or as stringent as the ultra-Orthodox. So joining that movement, Naftali Bennett grew the National Religious Party and brought in several other political movements into a party called Bayit HaYehudi, the home of the Jews. And this was a party that the name kind of speaks for itself, but this is a nationalist party that is focused on Israel as a Jewish state, but also getting as much land for Israel. So this is a party that represents more this is a party that represents a lot of settlers and Israeli right-wing voters. And I don't like the term settler, so I'm just going to... I don't even like that it's rolled off my tongue, so I'm going to say these are the residents of the Shomron and the Yehuda. These are the people who have the misfortune of living beyond the Green Line, which is a line drawn based on the armistice in 1949 that has no further political relevance today. But the international community insists on calling them settlers and saying that they're living on land that belongs to the Arabs by international law or something like that. It's a bunch of nonsense. None of that is true. This land could be negotiated away by Israel, which would be a mistake. But many of these communities are in and around Jerusalem. These are on ancient Jewish settlements, and we regularly dig up in the pottery and ancient Jewish cities and townships. So there's nothing here that they're settling or nothing illegal about their settlement. In any case, Naftali Bennett was born from American immigrant parents, and he speaks very good English, and he's very popular with especially Americans who've moved to Israel who've become very nationalist and right-wing. He is also a supporter of the free market, and there are some center-left and center-right parties that are more focused on economic liberalization and reduced regulation and seeing the forces of the free market brought to bear in Israel. As Bibi Netanyahu has been ascendant, especially since 2003 when Ariel Sharon made him finance minister, Israel has been heading in that direction. And the younger generation of Israelis are very favorable for it. There's a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of people are making good money, and so they very much favor the free market approach. The older generations, depending which generation you're talking to or talking about, will tend to lean a little more leftward economically, and they're more interested in socialism and that kind of thing. But the younger generation tends to fancy freedom of economic enterprise, free enterprise, and economic opportunity. Now, Naftali Bennett caters to this particular approach to politics. He favors and supports the people who live in the Shomron and the Yehuda and wants them to stay there and for those communities to be protected, and represents their interests and their security needs. And he also supports, like I said, free market policies, greater liberalization in Israel. And that's why it's not such a great surprise that he opposed the virus lockdowns and that sort of thing. He supports generally freedom and free market. One of the other members of his party is Ayelet Shaked, who served as justice minister for a number of years. And I had always told you I would share my biases. I'm a great fan of Ayelet Shaked. She did a massively wonderful job as justice minister, and she proposed a number of judicial reforms to clean up the judiciary a little bit There's been a lot of judicial activism, and she wanted the courts, especially those beneath the Supreme Court, to focus more on precedent and operating according to legal principles rather than being activists and sort of doing whatever they fancy with the law. Obviously, the Israeli Supreme Court, Israel being built largely on the British model, similar to that of the U.S., the Supreme Court has a lot more leverage and a lot more freedom. But some of the reforms that she proposed would even rein in a little bit the Supreme Court. Back to this idea in parliamentary systems that at the end of the day, the law should serve the people and not the people serve the law. Now, here in the U.S., we have a very different structure where the Constitution is supreme, theoretically, and all law is supposed to operate under that, and the Constitution is there on behalf of the people to protect our rights, but that's not really how parliamentary systems work. There are guiding principles, legal principles of rights and privileges that should not be broken, but at the end of the day, the government and the law should serve the popular need and what the people want. And so there's that natural tension. I want to say it's a kind of a check and a balance built into the system between Parliament and the courts. And to a certain degree, the courts can restrain Parliament's enthusiasm, but at the end of the day, Parliament is supposed to reign supreme. And that is why I favor Shaked and her reforms. So I cannot say that Yisrael Beteinu or at different times, or Yamina at different times might have earned my vote were I an Israeli, because at different times I have supported the kinds of agendas of both of these parties. Greater secularism, opposing the Haredi, and in the case of Yamina, the judicial reforms, the free market, and a strong sense of Jewish identity, but also the idea that the land that is, on which Jews live should be determined by Jews, and the Jews who are living in certain places should not be subject to removal because of whatever the international community thinks about lines on a map. So that is Yamina. In terms of where Naftali Bennett is, I mentioned that in an earlier episode that Bibi Netanyahu is purported to have offered Naftali Bennett a rotation in office to join him in coalition again, and Bennett has turned down that offer. Naftali Bennett could be a prime minister of Israel. He's certainly competent enough, and someone that Bibi might trust to hand off power to. I don't think there was ever a version of reality where Bibi was going to voluntarily give the prime minister's office over to a guy like Benny Gantz. But who knows? Naftali Bennett is a possibility there. So he's been mentioned as a prospect for prime minister before, and anything could happen. His poll numbers are certainly up there, but not where they would need to be a prime minister. But if he agreed with to join a coalition with Bibi Netanyahu, and that involved a rotation in office that would have him serve as prime minister, who knows? In any case, he would probably be just as happy to be foreign minister and represent Israel in the international stage or hold some other high-ranking cabinet position. But Yamina is an important center-right party, and now you know what they are all about. Well, that concludes another episode of Inside Israel News. As you can tell, I'm trying to improve my audio quality. I told you I would, as time goes on, try to improve things. Had a little feedback about, you've got this noise and that noise. I know, I'm trying. I want these episodes to be better. So new microphone, new sound, trying to smooth out some of those rough edges. As always, you can find me at insideisrael.news or Inside Israel on Facebook. And I look forward to hearing from you if you have feedback to offer there, along with the other feedback that has already been offered. Anyway, it's been a great episode, and I look forward to recording another one for your listening pleasure. Lehitraot. Goodbye.
אולי נפליגה בספינות מחוף אילת עד חוף שלהם ועל המשחטות הישנות יטעינו תפוחי זהב כל זה אינו משל ולא חלום זה נכון כאור בצהריים כל זה יבוא מחר אם לא היום